All right, welcome back to the program while Charlie's taking pot shots at me in the break.
Yeah, I waited right till the music started too, so he couldn't say anything.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're back. And, see, here's the big thing that I know that we left off, and I want to say welcome back to everybody, but we left off looking at that originally Adolf Hitler came up with a plan to categorize everybody and to separate them into groups, and which groups he wanted to take on and eliminate first, like the gypsies and so on and so forth. And he got with IBM to make that happen. Okay, they have been trying for a long time to get a individual automated identification system. And mass body disposal does two things. It helps them implement that for mass body disposal. And they blame it on, if a lot of people die for some crazy reason, these people have to be buried within 2 days because that's their religion. And these people have to be buried within 4 days. And these people don't have autopsies. So we have to come up with one of these plans, to satisfy all of these parties if this might happen. And it's the same basic idea. It's the same thing Hitler did right before he killed everybody. Charlie?
Yes, sir. Well, I think of more like the legislation that was in place before the Reichstag Chancellery was lit on fire by Hitler's, crew, which allowed this implementation of all this legislation that was written up until that point. And I know we've talked about this before. I truly think this is where we're at. This is the place we've been, going on the last 4 years. And a lot of people will say to us, you guys are talking about the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. Well, through the looking glass, I guess, of history, we haven't been talking about this all this long. If you think about the changes that are apparent in our society right now and how quick they've occurred, it's now at super high velocity that we see these changes. Eric, you've been in the sovereign movement for 20 years, and I think you would be the first to say the last. I'm not even going back a decade to 9/11. I'm talking the last 2.5 to 4 years has been one extraordinary event after another, destroying your freedom, destroying your future, taking your financial liberty away from you, and setting you up so that you are numb. You're completely numb to the fact that you have to answer to this authority. You have to answer to somebody in a blue uniform, or you have to answer to somebody in quote, government authority. And it's all for the betterment of society. It's for the betterment of our country. It's for the betterment of our economy. I really believe they're working hard to desensitize us to what's coming. So, I know the legislation that Hitler and his cronies put into play. People thought they said the exact same things then that they say now. The people who would complain about it and rally on the corners about it because obviously they didn't have the internet. Or the folks that were in basements, printing presses, putting out information, pamphlets, literature. The ones who eventually end up being butchered in a dark alley in some
shot, drug off.
Yeah, disappeared. Those are the same. Those people were being called the same kind of alarmists that we see a lot of folks in the alternative media being called alarmists now. And Eric, I don't know about you, but I'm basically to the point where if I get a comment or a feedback of, you've been saying this, when's this supposed to happen? When's this big collapse going to happen? If you don't see it now, guess what? I hate to break this to you, but you're never going to see it. You're not going to understand it. You're not going to understand it until it truly is in your door, in your home, affecting you.
That's right. When they're sitting in the middle of the kitchen floor, and they're holding one of their children or their wife, and they're bleeding out.
And I'll comply. Hey, I just want to, I want to get my mac and cheese, and I'll comply. Don't worry, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. Sure, you can look around the house to make sure I don't have any kind of crazy terrorist thing like a .22 revolver or something along those lines. I'll comply. I just, I want to get along.
Oh, and, you don't have guns. You don't have guns, Mr. McGrath. That's good, but you have too much food. and we need to confiscate at least half of it.
That's right. Yeah.
Huh. People don't realize they have no clue. It's happening right before their face. And I will tell you, from my perspective, looking back at the 90s and where it really all it took a launch in 95 when they had the militia commissions. And now most people don't even realize this took place in the mid 90s. But in 1994, 1995, they had the Oklahoma City bombing and so on and so forth. All those events that culminated around that time period led up to the gathering of the militia commission in front of Congress. And that's where you see he looks like a military gentleman. He is a African American, as people want to call themselves. I would just say a normal human being, and he's telling Congress, many people have seen the video, well, there are people with intelligence west of the so-and-so. Okay? This is what people don't understand, how close we came to it in the mid-90s. Right up to the brink where the two parties involved sat down. And it was Congress and these heads of this militia. Okay? They had to actually have a sit-down meeting, went on through the 90s. You can see the videos on YouTube. Now, since that point, they lulled a period until the early 2000s, and they used a dynamic event to change the course of the conversation. But people want to say that, well, I've been hearing this, because I hear it all the time. I've been hearing this since the 80s. That's what they'll say. I've been hearing some of this since the 70s. Well, you know what? You haven't done anything about it. That's why you keep hearing more and more, and it keeps getting worse and worse. Everything keeps going on because you haven't actually done anything. Your parades and your signs in the late 70s and the 80s, your protests in the 90s, and your mass pour-outs and your million-man marches have accomplished jack squat.
I don't know, Jack. Or squat.
But that's
Eric, I don't have an argument to counter that, because everything that's happened, I mean, there's been some awakening that's occurred through these kind of movements, but I also do know I have buckets of respect for people who've done that, for people who have taken to the streets under the Tea Party, under the Occupy movement, under the Ron Paul movement, under even folks who think locally that their Republican candidate can affect some kind of change and get us away from this tyrannical fascism we're heading into, because at least they are involved. So I really have a hard time blaming the people who are actually doing something or holding them at a standard that is above the people who are completely zoned out and or challenge you on your facts because they think everything is going to be just fine because of, fill in the blank. The Federal Reserve's got it under control. Our military's got it under control. These wars are patriotic.
Here's my problem with it, Charlie. Okay? Here's my problem with the whole entire issue. Once we start mixing it with the public and we start talking about who's responsible, well, then let's really talk about it. Your compliance, your complacency to do something about it, guarantees my slavery. How can I look at you as being anything other than my enemy? There's no way to address it at that point. When you bottom line look at it, and simply because you won't do anything, I'm going to die or lose my freedom or whatever, the case may be, your complacency bears guilt. And you have to shoulder that guilt. And I'm going to tell people, look, when you see a community that disappears in the middle of Georgia because of their beliefs, it's your fault. We'll be right back after these messages.
Yeah, and I'll make an announcement on what's going on with the second hour. For those of you in the chat room, you can see in the schedule there, we have a bunch of Freeman and Karen Tostado hosting the second hour of Wide Awake News Radio tonight. We're going to be back with the great Eric Lovely and more Wide Awake News Radio in just a few minutes.
And, Charlie McGrath is still here with us. We're glad for everyone who's been sticking around and listening to us and paying attention to the show. And look, we're not trying to be, detrimental to certain people. We're attempting to tell you that we're coming to the point now in this ball game where I don't know how much time you have to wake up how many people left. The government is basically showing all of its colors now. It removed the MEK from their terrorist list, And 3 days after that happened, the MEK kidnapped a bunch of Iranian scientists on religious holiday and said that if the Syrian president doesn't step down, that this terrorist group is going to skin them and videotape it and cut their heads off and cut their male genitalia off and so on and so forth, and then mail these tapes to their families and to all these places. And it'll be our fault. It'll be the Syrian president's fault for not surrendering and laying down arms. That it's the reason why these people died. And the reason why we're okay with this is because there are terrorists. You see, if they're our terrorists, well, then everything they do is of great purpose and great meaning. But
they're freedom fighters, brother.
Oh, that's right, they're freedom fighters. But if they're someone else's terrorists, oh, well, we got to expend millions and millions of dollars to bomb their whole entire neighborhood to make sure we kill them.
That's exactly right. And as long as we're backing, I mean, think back at Libya. John McCain. It still makes me ill. I mean, that whole thing is exactly been replayed over and over again throughout the Middle East, and will continue to up until they drag us into a war that is what do we have, Syria and Turkey now going at it, which this most certainly could explode into a very large regional war.
We needed troops on the ground in Syria. And that's what our by proxy is Turkey. We couldn't take the political turmoil of land invading another country. So we are going to war with Syria because the rebels can't get the job done. And we want him out. We want a different regime in. So we're in there going to fight by proxy with the Turkey army. Okay, it's just the same thing the British used to do with the Irish in their empire in the days of old. It's disgusting.
No doubt about it, and it's coming to a head. This is one of the catalysts that we talk about, and I recently was just in Salt Lake and visiting with my friend Chris Atkin of Bioemergency Foods, and we were having a nice dinner, and just, it's pretty rare that you get to meet face-to-face some of the folks and friends that we make in this on this journey, and it was nice to sit down with him, and he had asked me what I thought. Are you all right, buddy?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, good. He had asked me what I thought of, what I think the catalyst is going to be for a collapse, and it was interesting because he's asking me, hey, you're not on the air, you're not on YouTube. What do you really think is going to happen? And I said, I'm going to be honest. I don't think it's going to be military. Although I could be proven wrong on this. I think we're going to see an engineered, a staged and engineered, that it has been for years, sovereign debt meltdown, because it's the fastest way to go from this phony normalcy into chaos would be to let this sovereign debt crisis play out. And there's been a lot of maneuvering, a lot of wrangling, a lot of changing of legislation, a lot of evaporation of rule of law in nations around the world, not just the United States, but staging and putting in the right puzzle pieces. So when these events happen, it's a trigger mechanism, and suddenly nations are not in control of their own finances anymore. And we need to understand that as go the finances of a nation, goes the nation. You govern, you control the financial aspect of what your nation can do. You control that nation. So I really believe that over the years, the last several years, we've seen the staging and positioning of legislation and individuals and so-called safety nets that are going to be the governing bodies of this planet very soon. Very soon. I mean, it's going to be a matter of a credit freeze, a meltdown in pick your country. Pick it in Europe. I mean, it's there's 17 of them. One of them's going under. It could even be as small as a country as Greece that will implement this disaster, this catastrophe. And it's not going to be something that happens in Greece tomorrow, like we've seen over the last 4 years. Greece tomorrow, an oh my God moment, and then a meeting of the European Central Bank or the European players, and then we have false hope for a few days. It's going to be quite different than that when this finally does bust. It's going to be, oh my God, these folks defaulted. They've written down all their debt. They're defaulting on their debt. And then it is going to be literally at the speed of light that it occurs across this globe, across the planet, digitally, automatically, black box trading. It's going to happen in a daytime environment in one country, and by the morning in this country, we will wake up and understand that how interconnected we really are and why we should have been paying attention to what's going on across the pond. And I think you could go from a situation that we're in right now, which is desperate and obviously depressionary to those who are awake and can look through the lies of the 7.8% unemployment number and look at the real data, to everybody's going to understand it, because when we have this massive credit freeze, nothing is going to work. And Eric Lovely, can you imagine a faster way to quickly affect everybody on this earth within a matter of 24 hours?
No, and it is going to be, man, it is going to be so massive, and it doesn't matter what country that you're in, okay? This is going to be a worldwide struggle for mankind's humanity. That's the way I can best describe it to people. Imagine all of the things that he just said. Now let's couple in there, okay, with the poor people, the people who are going to die all over Europe and Africa and so forth. The grain prices and the grain shortage that's going to hit 9 or 10 months from now. All of the drought and all the food storage shortages that is going to hit in roughly 9 to 10 months, the next spring. I mean, couple that into these nations where inflation is so rampant that the supply is so low and the inflation is so high that just a loaf of bread is something that's just simply out of the question. I mean, what do you think is going to happen? It's tragic. It's tragedy that's getting ready to happen. En masse. Biblical proportions, you know. This is what I'm looking at.
Yeah, well, the tragedy is that so many are going to be completely off guard.
So many people are going to die because of it, you know.
Yipster just put in chat, which is, you guys are going to hear me say this for 2 more minutes, but I'm monitoring chat as we're going here. Merkel went to Greece, and they needed to have 5,000 police to protect her. I mean, everything is ready to pop. Everything is ready to bust. And in our country, good old United States of America, you have a two-party political system that is...
jousting. I mean, it's useless.
Yeah. Well, they're doing everything imaginable to stoke and to pack more gunpowder into this powder keg that this nation is, and it is. I mean, you can go on YouTube and look for political unrest, look for political attacks, and you'll see umpteen videos of people freaking out, man. They're freaking out because, you know, they're supposed to, according to the blue team or the red team.
Yeah.
And it's easy to do in a nation that has been devastated.
And the last time that this happened on a nearly worldwide scale was the Roman times. And there are scientists that believe, historians that believe between 50 and 55% of the known world's population died in the collapse of the Roman Empire. Okay? Now, basically, you know, there's no doubt. The empire has almost encompassed the entire known globe, except for the few holdout countries who didn't want anything to do with our debt slave and our debt creation of money. That's the reality.
Yeah, where are they at now, Eric?
They get bombed and killed and made, you know, to not get sidetracked.
Right.
While all of these cities and fiefdoms and the governments of Rome was burning and this population was dying, the people in Rome, the city of Rome, i.e. the United States, they were throwing lavish parties, they were killing and eating hogs, they were having dirty, nasty sex, and they were doing all of these just far out things, and when people talked about the empire is burning, they would laugh and drink more wine and have more sex and spend more fiat dollars that didn't mean anything. I mean, this is the realization.
I didn't know if your pause was you're telling me to talk, but and Eric, we have that exact same thing now. I mean, it's even easier to be distracted and be derailed. It's really easy to not pay attention to what's going on because of pop culture, because of propaganda, because the ability to communicate this kind of propaganda so readily across many forms and many mediums. And then you factor in the idea that we have a system that is allowing this papering over. You know, this papering over, and I know we're going to run out of time here, but this papering over is akin to every time they paper something over, we climb a little bit higher up a cliff, up the edge of a cliff. And every time we extend a little bit longer, we're not extending vertically or horizontally down the road, we're extending vertically up the cliff. But as long as we keep climbing, you know, nobody's seeing what's below us. Everybody only sees, well, we're moving upward, and we're moving in a upward positive direction. But the reality of it is, at a point, when we do finally break loose and fall, all the people who never bothered to look down are going to be the ones who are absolutely blown away with how frail and shaky the entire system was. And all it took was one event, one little tiny itty-bitty nation to do something like, you know, sink a ship in the middle of the Straits of Hormuz or default on their debt, and it's game over. Eric, lovely, wrap it up.